Hello, thank you for joining the channel. My name is Brian Nord, and I want to welcome you. Tonight we are discussing Landmark Worldwide and the Landmark Forum. And there's been all sorts of noise about Landmark over the last several months after a book came out, which we'll discuss in a moment. And people who are former staff like myself, I was a staff and program leader and
Like the both of us.
Yeah, the Landmark super fan for 26 years. And we are really using this platform to bring to light some real, I don't know, to me, it's an idea whose time has come, that Landmark it's like doing a transformation on transformation. So that's what we're doing tonight. And I got Eric with me. So
good to be here, Brian.
And it's great to be with you too, Eric. And Eric, everybody, we did an interview last week, and then Eric said, decided to be my co-host after we did the interview. So that wasn't staged, but it's super exciting. And we're creating a real bond. So Eric, anything you want to say to begin?
Just happy to be here. And like Brian, I'm a former staff member, a former program leader. And I think that what this is unfolding into is a conversation that has been needing to be had. And for a lot of people some people have wanted this to happen. And so here we are, and we're doing it as public as can be.
That's right. I want to say to everybody that I've gotten a lot of messages. Eric was super brave. So I really thank you for sharing your story. If you haven't watched that, you can see it on the channel. Brian Nord is the name of the channel. And it's really creative. We're coming up with names for different names to the channel. You can actually suggest them in the comments. That'd be great. Anyhow, but Eric, you were so brave last week. It's great to be with you and to be partners with this. And tonight, what we're doing tonight, this episode, or whatever you want to call this live, is intended. It's really a direct communication that we all can participate in. So you can include your comments. We will include them. But this is directly to Landmark. We're talking to Landmark tonight. And about really the opportunity for Landmark to get what in Landmark, we're going to use a lot of Landmark terminology tonight too. But the opportunity tonight is for Landmark to get off of it. And that is really the intention. Is I am firmly believe that if Landmark makes some changes that people have been begging for, quitting over, abused over for a long time, if Landmark made some changes, it literally would end all of this negative PR. And so the goal is to discuss that. Go ahead, Eric.
Some of these won't be familiar to some of the people listening. Some of them will be, I'm sure there will be people who listening who have had the exact same ideas, who thought to themselves, gosh, if, Landmark made that one change, it would make such a difference. And like Brian said, we were such fans. In fact, Brian and I grew up at Landmark. We were like practically kids. And
I started when I was 20. Eric was a kid. He was 15.
Yeah. And so, a lot of we'll get into it, but Landmark made a huge difference in our life. And we do believe that firmly. But at the same time, it's also has been harmful and destructive for us in our own unique ways. And so we're here to talk about what in our opinion we think the changes that should be made, that they could actually implement immediately.
Yeah, and these are our opinions. Before I decided to go public with this stuff, I looked up the law, and one of the things is that you're allowed to be a critic of something. And to have an opinion. And this is our opinion. And I believe some of the things that we're discussing, they might be, like emotionally upsetting for some people. I don't think so, but they could be. So be kind to yourself. You don't have to listen to the whole thing all at once. I think taking things slow has been good advice that I've been getting. as I've been unpacking the Landmark experience. All right, Eric.
Right.
So I think that's a great start. Thank you, everybody. And like in the comments, somebody just said, the original founder of the S training that the Landmark ideas are based on, Werner Erhard, said that integrity is like gravity. So another way of saying this is that Landmark needs to restore its integrity with people. I noticed in the comments on Facebook, Eric, a lot of people suggesting that the people who are speaking up are incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of like, well, Landmark is committed that people get complete, or that people, but it's kind of like somebody needs to go to Landmark to get complete. But really, it's Landmark is what our opinion is tonight that needs to get complete with its people who have cared about it.
Correct. And there have been people who've made comments that we need to go to the enterprise and get ourselves complete. And that just hasn't settled well with us, has it, Brian?
No. Well, I don't think it's tone deaf.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we in a very real sense, we have built that company.
Correct.
We have helped that company grow. We've not only been employed by them, but we have led their programs on assisting agreements. I know it's not an assisting agreement anymore, but
only in the US. The rest of the world still has assisting.
Okay. So let's just get into it.
All right, good. Let's do it. All right. So tonight we put together a PowerPoint and everything. And it's embarrassing because I didn't know how to do it on here. So the first slide is dumb, but the rest of it's good. So we introduced ourselves. All right. So all of this is just what I decided to do as a little update for people. The book we're referring to is called Is This a Cult? It's written by Ann Peterson. You can get it on Amazon. It opens up a conversation about taking self-help, transformative courses like the Landmark Forum, and how the industry can be safe. So it's for people who take these courses. Her whole journey really sets up a narrative that the truth is, you could go to, Tony Robbins has had reports of at his weekends of people not being safe and people being harmed, for example. So where the whole thing is leading to is a conversation that's super valuable about the safety and well-being of people, not just participating in these organizations, but the people who work for them and lead for them. So that's the book. If you haven't read it yet, we invite you to do it. It kind of ripped open everybody's hearts and minds in this. And I think what she's done is really commendable. The next thing
something that's been needed for a long time. For a long time, people have thought about coming public about what their Landmark, or in her case, her experience working with Werner Erhard. And so it's the way I see it, it's a snowball that's just, keeps going.
Yeah, and I mean, she mentioned in the book that a lot of people have a fear of malicious litigation, and that they'll be sued. And people who have spoken up have been sued by Landmark as well. The next thing, but I believe most of them were probably more in the expert field. And so they were using their professional opinion in their books. Anyhow, Ann book talks about this, and we just want to let you know that there's a podcast called Seek Safely. I didn't understand this at first, but it's for seekers like me. If you opened up my phone, you'd probably find 100 books that are like how to be the best person ever, how to influence people, how to be great in a relationship, how to eat less and still be happy. I'm a self-helper. And people who love seeking, the whole Seek Safely movement is about what we talked about. Basically, the woman who started it, her brother went to a sweat lodge weekend retreat kind of group awareness training and died. And the whole background behind it led her to start this organization called Seek Safely, and the podcast is fascinating. And Anne is her second interview has now dropped on your wherever you get your podcasts. And then the other one that I wanted to get everybody aware to, write this one down. It is just incredible, is Why We Don't Always Look Before We Leap. You can get this on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. It's the channel is John Attic, maybe I'm spelling it wrong, Family and Friends Podcast. So this Dr. John Hunter does an amazing job explaining the neurobiology that happens to people when they're in the forum. He doesn't say the forum. I shouldn't say that. Large group awareness trainings in the weekend.
The forum is being one of them, right? But it's not just the forum, but any large group awareness training. And anyway, yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Did you watch this or listen to it?
I just finished listening to it. It's fascinating, and it's so, for those of you who haven't listened that will be listening, you're really challenged because you find yourself right back in any large group seminar, whether it was the forum, whether it's a Tony Robbins weekend, whether it was the Introduction to Leaders Program weekend, whatever weekend you think you had a transformation. Dr. John Hunter really gets into what's going on in the brain and what's going on with us psychologically as we're experiencing and we're participating, and the danger really in participating and what we can do to be responsible when we're going through these high peaks of emotion.
Yeah, I mean, we're not experts, but it's fascinating. I actually called and spoke to Dr. John Hunter. And, one of the things I loved about his whole messaging is he wasn't like against Landmark. He was being critical of some of the things about the way and his point was that people literally, biologically, his theory is that people actually get into a state of euphoria. And it's known for people who get into a state of euphoria that they will act impulsively. So that the program is designed like, oh my God, boom, I get into this state of euphoria. Now let me sign up and spend $800 on the advanced course and bring my friends and family. So it's more of a criticism of the design and the possibility of exploitation. But I actually walked away, and him and I talked about the value I got out of the forum, because it didn't take that away. Just because the process is there's something happening in the brain while you're going through the forum, is his point. And he was not particularly, he wasn't on an agenda against something. And that really helped me out, because I love Landmark, and I loved my Landmark forum, and it healed my family. So my commitment, so I could claim that value, that transformation, however you want to call it, that I got out of the forum, but to understand all of what's going on and how that may set up to later, some of these things we're going to be talking about tonight, some of these other issues, I think is really powerful. So I highly recommend it. Again, it's called Why We Don't Always Look Before We Leap. And there's actually 4 different episodes with John Attack and John Hunter. And I highly recommend this. If you've not seen it, it's very entertaining. Lots of good stuff in it. It's just great. Okay. Yeah. All right. Other thing of note before we get into the top 5 is that please subscribe to the channel, the Brian Nord channel, which might change its name, but you can still subscribe to it and like this video. That helps. Eric and I are doing this, but we're kind of done assisting. So the way YouTube works is that once you have 1,000 subscribers and so many hours, they start sending you some money. Now, from what I understand, it's like nickels, but at least my new goal in life is to not work for free again. So I would love that support. And if you're finding this valuable and worth it, then that supports us. Okay. And me. Okay. And what we're doing. Anything you want to say about that, Eric?
Well, and not only that, but it also helps the algorithm. You know, we really want to have as many people watch this as possible. And the way the YouTube system works is the more people are subscribing and the more people are engaging with it, commenting and liking, the more it'll disperse it to different people engaging with videos that are similar to this. So there's also that, which is equally, if not more important in us getting our message out.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So if you're a fan of the message of this, please jump in. All right, good. All right, so that's updating you. So we're doing the top 5 changes for Landmark Worldwide needs to make. Here's the points of why we're doing this. One, I don't think Landmark, it doesn't need to become the next Netflix miniseries about a strange organization. I know people like insider information, and I'm obsessed with true crime. And, but Landmark doesn't need that. It has a huge loyal customer base who really swear that the forum is safe and it changes people's lives. And for the most part, its critics, people like us, would love to see change of the organization over the destruction of the organization. So we're asserting it's time for Landmark to get off of it, let go of being right, and deal with reality. The reality is it's time to change Landmark. Okay, so the first change, number 1, is and this is going to be really interesting for some of you. And for some of you, you have no idea that this happens. And I'm saying that this is the number 1 change that needs to happen at Landmark, which is to end the practice of candidations and designations.
Well, and before you kind of get into that, Brian, I just want to say, Landmark knows these 5 things likely need to change, and they've been brought up before. And the reason why so many of this why nobody's ever said these 5 things that we're going to say, at least publicly, is because there rarely is any actual critique from people who have either worked there or who have some level of seniority with the delivery of its programs, its operations, and such. So anyway, I just had to add that in there. But yeah, let's get into number 1.
No. It's really good. And I don't know if they think of this one. This might be new news, but I have received, Eric and everybody, thousands now of messages from people after I did the interview with Aaron Smith Levin. And thanks, Nick. Somebody said my pink shirt is working. Thank you. I like it. I thought it was cute. Love that. So some of you may not be aware of this. So one of the things that I've been trying to understand is, how did I get here? How does 26 years of your life go by where you are a super fan and then you turn around and become somebody who's publicly calling out an organization? How does that work? How does it work when you love something as much as I did? And one of the things that I've gotten is thousands, and this is really a communication to Landmark as well, thousands of messages from former seminar leaders, communication course leaders, self-expression leaders, and forum leaders. Not thousands of forum leaders. There haven't been thousands of them, but many.
Graduates, hundreds of former staff members.
Former staff, but yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, between you and I combined, there are people who are not commenting and who are not engaging with the videos and the posts, but they have watched and they have reached out to us and they have shared things with us that are hair-raising. They're awful. Some things that are not, at the same time, they're not a surprise to us. So just because there are people who aren't engaging in the comments or who aren't sharing about the video or who aren't coming out publicly like us doesn't mean that they haven't messaged us directly about it.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that was, I think, a blind spot for me, it's why I put it at number 1, and I believe it's huge for Landmark, is so to understand what I mean by designations and candidations, we need to get a little more into the inside of what it is to be what really is indoctrination. I didn't even know what that word meant before I did this. I didn't go to college. I don't know if you did, Eric, but I don't know. I'm just not that educated in certain things, and indoctrination. I was working at Landmark. I don't know what that means. Um, so what this means though is, so what happens when I'll just use the seminar leader example, because I think it's one of the most, you have the most upset group of people, people that have been, I think, verbally abused the most, and is a human resources nightmare, is the seminar leader program. And the way it works is that when you go to a weekend. So Eric, were you ever a seminar leader?
I never led seminars. No, I led the Introduction to Leaders program, but not seminars.
I love what you just said. So a seminar leader wouldn't say, I led seminars. Being a seminar leader is not about leading the seminars. It's about who you are as a human being. So there are people who actually have led seminars that are not a seminar leader. And then there are the people that are a seminar leader. Now, isn't that a word salad in of itself?
Yeah.
So when you say I led a seminar, it's not about leading or not. It's about who you are. So where they start you is something called an orientation weekend. In that weekend, they might spend a little time going over agreements, or telling you what to expect, or what's going to be required out of you. But almost the entire weekend is about you beginning to, and this is very much, if you listen to the Dr. Attell thing, it very much happens in this weekend, where they say that we're not going to let you into this program. We're not letting you in. And people then confess throughout the weekend the thing that they never would want to tell people. It could be that it's probably your very most intimate secret that you would never say. It could be a sexual nature. It could be somebody you lied to, cheated on. It's usually in the lying, cheating, stealing domain of your life. So they lead it from, we're not letting you in. And what happens throughout the weekend is you basically cough up whatever this thing is that you would never tell them. Now, so there's that piece. That alone is kind of hair raising. Like, what does that have to do with leading a transformational seminar? Like, when you lead a seminar, you have to read a manual word for word, basically. So what does that have to do with anything? So the first thing is you cough up this thing about yourself.
It brings back memories of other, it brings back memories of the vow when they have to do that, where there's collateral that, now this may not be the case here, but just collateral to be used against you in the future or whatnot.
Yeah, I don't know if they do that. I didn't mean collateral that way if I said it that way. I mean that you've now handed over the most intimate details of your life, and they don't let you in the program. Now, remember, you have worked your butt off, often for 2 to 2.5 years, to earn the right to even be at that orientation, and you're sitting there, and after all of that work, they lead the weekend from, we're not going to let you in until you give over this, whatever it is. And we don't know what it is, but you're going to give it over. Right? There's comments. It was brutal. So then you surrender, you get vulnerable. This is a very emotionally stressful thing. People think, hey, I'm good, I'm great, I told you something. They're like, no. So it begins what they call, and I'm not an expert, but in listening to I'm probably going to refer to it through a lot of this because I found it so riveting. That podcast on why we don't look before we leap sometimes, or whatever. He called it a authoritarian gap. It's like the leaders who are the seminar leaders are over here. Sorry, my camera. They're here and you're back here, and you want to be that. You've been working towards that. So you need to surrender to them and work on your process to work your way to be that. So they have the gap is in their authority. So that gives them a certain control because you care about earning this promotion, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've worked on, and it means something to you. And a lot of people around you have supported you. So you get there. By the way, this is what it is like. I don't know what happens for forum when people become a forum leader, but I know that phenomenon is similar where you worked your butt off to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And in the forum leader body, I know that they have a promise that they make when they go in that they will let the forum leaders do whatever they need to do to get through to them. So I have heard heinous reports of some of the things that have been done of getting through to someone. So what this is all about is about identity. So what you begin to be oriented to, but it's really indoctrinated in, is
Mm-hmm.
that, Eric, and since you didn't do it, I can use you as an example. The theory is that you, Eric, you know yourself as an identity. You
Mm-hmm.
relate to yourself as a thing, as this Eric that you like podcasts and you live in San Diego. I don't know, like you have a relationship with
I'm a husband. I have children. Yeah, I have a dog. I have a business.
Yeah,
all
so
that stuff.
Exactly. So you'd go to that seminar leader weekend and they would tell you you're not a husband. You're not an artist. And people really struggle with that. And some people say I'm out. And that's the end of their maybe decade-long time at Landmark. But for those who kind of buy into the notion that I am not who I have considered myself to be. I'm not my roles. I am nothing. So if you let it come in, it's actually quite an empowering and maybe even an enlightened thing that I'm actually nothing. And that's what they interact with you. They literally say, you are nothing. Now, they could come up with better words, because when you tell someone they're nothing, some people get very emotionally stressed out as well.
Mm-hmm.
But if they hang out long enough, they actually get, okay, I can get the reality of this or the view of this, or it's like I can discover for myself, I am nothing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then what they do with that, if you can get that far, is what they do with that then is they then say, okay, now from nothing, just like in the Bible, there was nothing and then there was the word. Maybe who you really are is your word. Okay, like who you say you are. Okay, that's also powerful. But then what they do one step after that is they say, okay, now here is the word of seminar leader. To be in this club, you need to give your word that who you are is seminar leader. And they even give you a list of attributes. And from my studies, most of those attributes were in the 80s and the 70s, they would just call that Werner. So you're nothing, you're not a father, you're nothing. You're from nothing. You can give your word, like getting married, to being seminar leader, who is this list of attributes.
So they really strip you of everything.
Correct. Yeah, they bring you down to nothing. I don't think they would say we're stripping you, but that's essentially what's happening. And as I've been unpacking, what is this whole experience? I got turned on, so I'm going to open up our slide here again. So in this stage, I put in here the next slide. Sorry, everybody. So this is something called the influence continuum. It's by Stephen Hassan. I know it's a little
And
hard
I know
to...
if it's difficult, yeah, I was just about to say, if it's a little hard to read, what we can do is we'll add a link or something like that so people can see it after the video is
Yes.
done.
You can also Google influence continuum and you'll get this. And it's part of his Freedom of Mind website. But this is the thing about, so he's the world's foremost expert on combating, what his book is called, Combating Cult Mind Control. He also does not say that Landmark is a cult. However, he puts it in a category of organizations that have well, I don't know, I don't want to speak for him, but undue influence. And if you look at the top, you can see that what he's saying is that in a constructive, healthy organization, the first thing it's cut off is authentic self. This is just a model. It's not the truth. It's a way to look at things. But if you go all the way across for an individual in a destructive or an unhealthy, when it's destructive and unhealthy, what gets placed from your true self, like who you are, who you know, your authentic self, gets replaced with a false and the group or cult identity. This is literally what happens in a seminar leader weekend, in my opinion. And the orientation is that they really have you, if you were like, oh my gosh, I'm a father, I'm an artist, I'm gay, I'm this, I'm that, they walk you through this process. And by the end, who you are is this identity that only exists in the organization. So after you're done with this, I can stop, I can take this down. After you're done, just in that weekend, then what you start to do is you literally see the world. You walk out into the world, and well, you used to walk around like not even thinking about it, but you're like a dad and you're this, all of a sudden everybody else looks like they are not you, and you are like seminar leader all around. You are these things, these attributes. And what I've learned is why I'm saying this is the number one thing that Landmark needs to change and to end, is that I've been hearing where they're getting all these comments, all these people that are outraged. I didn't like sit down and do a thing. But what I'm seeing is probably the largest percentage of them are people who were in the seminar leader program, because there's something called the designation team. And in those designation teams, people have been, basically every aspect of your life, you have to give to these people. They coach you. If you are uncoachable, you're out of integrity. That could mean many different things, from getting removed from leading your seminar, to being stripped of your goals. I mean, you could lead, and by the way, you could lead a seminar where everybody's loving it, they're naturally sharing, and even having people come as their guests because they're so inspired. None of that matters in this construct. They have you. Anytime you have a complaint, well, you're not being a seminar leader. And people have had really major issues. And I believe the human resources department at Landmark has been completely blind to it. And I just have horror story after horror story of people messaging me. And it's very recent. None of these people, and I was a seminar leader, so maybe that's why I get so many of these. But people don't know me. I get them from people who don't know me. People who are just like, thank you for speaking up. Because when somebody was a seminar leader, I don't care if they're currently a paid one. I don't think they get paid that much. Or they were in the assisting program, or they're in some academy. These people, you could be there for 15 years and be being completely gaslit. It's really...
and if you think about it, I mean, I'm just thinking about it for myself. You've given yourself years of your life to get yourself to this point, and to be threatened with the possibility of no longer being able to do what you work so hard to do because of one or two things.
Oh, and it
Sounds
gets worse
awful.
because you become somebody in the community. So all those people in your seminars, they look up to you. You have made promises to them. So then you become like somewhat of a filter where you're being treated unfairly. And people, by the way, gain reputations in this clique, in this group, and sometimes they can never escape them. They might even move to another city where they have a different designation team just to get out of it. And the people who lead the designation group are really the chair people, especially the head chairperson is a very devout to Werner Erhard, living their life inside the purpose of Werner's intentions, blah, 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 word salad extraordinaires. So these people are no joke. They've been around since they go all the way back. And you know what? Not too many people have gone that far. You know, like there's only so far you can go in that construct. It's really been devastating for Landmark. They've lost tons of customers over this matter. They don't even realize it. It's a mess. Maybe they do realize it and they're trying to figure it out. But until they get out of the indoctrination business, they can't move forward. It will always be weird. You can't take your biggest fans and then interact and treat them this way and send them in the world that way. It just ends up destroying any credibility you have as well. And I think the worst part about it is most graduates and former seminar leaders, although their hearts are broken, part of why they don't speak up like I am is because they believe it will impact Landmark. Will never, Landmark will go away forever if they do. And they had a transformation like I did at the beginning. So this is where this matters. So what's the fix? The fix is to stop it. The fix is to just literally end designations. I think Landmark, because it's online now, could really just stop you doing the seminar leader program. And I've heard from SELP leaders too, but I was one and I never experienced any of this stuff when I was an SELP leader.
It's very,
self-expression
from when I worked
program.
from when I worked in the centers, the seminar leader body was always very cliquey. And you knew in any given center who the head honcho in that clique was. And they usually tend to lead the big senior graduate seminar. And, I didn't really experience that with SELP leaders. I never led either of those two programs. So it's good that you're speaking to this.
Don't get me wrong. I loved being a seminar leader. I actually liked the fellow people in the seminar leader body. I believe our group was pretty good, but when I've had the privilege of going to other regions and other people, and I think the whole thing is a hot mess. And I think Landmark doesn't need to have it in its current form. And all of this praise and see in some of these regions, because they divide everybody up in some of these regions that they will. They've literally, I mean, I don't want to tell other people's stories, but I'm telling you that they would be like, there's nothing about your life that happens in your life that's private. You should be able to say everything in front of a seminar. You're the word of seminar leader. Meanwhile, that person, they're not talking about like if it's a woman, their menstrual cycle. There are things you do not need to talk about in front of people. And there's some things that are none of this designation team's business. But they make everything their business. It's just really, it's unregulated by the Human Resources Department. It's been nasty. People have failed. People have quit. People are heartbroken. People are destroyed in that aspect of the organization. And all of these people were super fans. Landmark could actually get many of them back, and they would always do right by them because they loved it so much. So they've lost their shirt, and it's over this matter. So I think it's huge. And the forum leader thing is crazy. That some of the stories I've been listening to about their designations, forum leaders also make some promise. They talk about these things and it's like, you go, really? I mean, forum leaders don't always lead the forum forever, but I guess they make a promise forever, like, kind of like the Mormons do, about how like their families will be forever brought to heaven or something. The forum leaders have some weird promise that's for all eternity of all their being. It's very woo-woo and weird. And I personally think that Mick Levitt is the president of Landmark. He's the one who is in charge of like their like this PR, and he's, I think, going to become the CEO at some point, is their plan. But he had to be designated or candidated or whatever they call it, but he had to become one of these forum leaders as part of his training. So in that construct, he will always be loyal to the forum leader word first, not the graduates, and not to the people. That there's something about that word that they make, and then it gets them. It's just a weird world. It doesn't have any place in the year 2024, and it makes Landmark really. That's why they get criticized. And when you go on Google and you start writing Landmark worldwide, Google autofills populates the word cult, because it, from an outside reality perspective,
it's weird.
It's weird as can be.
Yes.
So I'm saying that's number one.
Great. And I agree.
And it begins.
I don't have
early.
anything else to say.
Yeah, well, it begins in the introduction leaders program. Oh, look, I got
even
candidated.
before that.
Yeah, like all those weird text messages you get. Hey, people still get them. I have one more person to register in the forum. Because
is there anybody in your life?
Yeah, I want to get candidated. Like it's just, it has nothing to do with anything. So anyway, I cannot say enough about that. That is, believe it or not, Landmark, your biggest thing that needs to change. All right, next thing. Whoops. 2 is end leaders being salespeople. And guest sales nights, they should be optional. You will do better, and you'll do much better in your sales, and it's just not ethical. So let me say what I mean by this, okay? Because this is super important for people to understand about why Landmark is just treated, why so many people are upset with it, and why it can't seem to grow, even though they do have a really amazing product called the Forum. So let me talk about this for a second. Now, this is not a new piece of criticism coming to Landmark, and they've been hearing this one for a while. But one of the things that's super manipulative in the outside world is that I've been sharing all night about, somebody in the notes in the chat says it diminishes the possibility of the work. Very well said. So this is important, Eric. And everybody to understand this. Okay, so look, couple things. One is that when I go do a course that is asking so much of me to be vulnerable about my life, right? And I trust that forum leader, and I love that forum leader. I would never, in reality, in any context of like a mature professional organization, I would never suspect that leader, what they're going to be being interacted with is the number of guests that come in Tuesday and how many people register into the next course. And that would be
I was just going to say, at every single program at Landmark, that's the case. The way every single program leader is measured is on the number of guests that were brought and the number of people that registered. And if it isn't the number of guests that they brought and the number of people that registered, it's of the people in the course, how many people remained and how many people registered and what's next. It's all about it's 100% sales driven, and that's the measurement. And it doesn't
matter that see how they justify that is they say, well, if someone transforms, they will bring guests. But here's the part where Landmark is totally inauthentic in its delivery. They always say to people, and I now heard this from somebody in my own home who was talking about his own forum. And the thing they kept saying is the most important part of the forum is Tuesday night. I will tell you something, and this is a big one because Landmark, you'll have to get off it about this because this is what people think. The graduates, the forum leaders, the head of the forum leaders says it's a conspiracy. The graduates are in a conspiracy about this. It's just not true. Landmark's just very tone deaf. The most important thing for me in the forum was that when I realized that just because I don't want to talk about people that my family without their permission, but I was able to heal this incident that happened in my family. And it was really a story I made up. It was a interpretation I had of something that got said that had me completely disconnect. And when I got that, I was not interacting with what actually happened, but I was actually interacting with my like this story I got into about it. It changed myself and our family and my view of life forever. That was the most important part of my forum.
Correct.
Not Tuesday night. I barely remember Tuesday night. I had 4 people with me. I don't remember.
It's the most important night for Landmark.
Correct. And they need to stop saying that and browbeating. They should just make it optional. If you want to come, come. If you don't. They would do probably better just taking the pitch of that off. And they beat that into you from your call. They won't even if you're on staff, if you told somebody, by the way, the forum leader, it's not against them if somebody misses Tuesday night. Statistically speaking, and how Landmark counts things, if somebody goes all the way through Sunday, they graduate from the forum. But if you're on staff and you tell somebody, oh, it's okay to miss Tuesday night, I mean, you could get written up for that. Completely. There's hell to pay if you tell somebody that Tuesday night they don't need to be at. And it's almost all sales that Tuesday evening. Go ahead.
I mean, it's all 100% sales. It's an entire sales night.
Well, they say there's a second half, but it's like 20 minutes. And if there weren't enough sales of people registering, they'll push that or
they'll push it into it. Yes.
Their integrity about it.
And I mean, I can't tell you how many times when I was managing an evening session, was late in that room waiting for that 1 or 2 last people that were sitting in their chair and they were unsure whether they're going to register or not, and they just would not let them leave because it was the last registration that had to happen before the evening could conclude. And it's not only the pressure to bring the guests, but the pressure to register your friends and family that needs to end.
Oh, well, everybody's got a word. The word of introduction leader is on the line. The word of forum leader is on the line. The word of staff members on the line. I mean,
registration manager, the center manager.
That last person didn't register. Maybe you went to McDonald's, but you're supposed to be off carbs or something that day. I mean, like you're going to have to clean this up. It's not a good thing. So get them in the chat. Oh my God, yes, go back in and get them registered. And that's still
it's just so wild to me because they were even you want to talk about how just neurotic this is. I mean, there would be times where it was like you need to go to the 7-Eleven on the corner and you need to find whoever you need to find to come in and to this evening session because we're short 1 or 2 guests, and that is what's going to make or break the evening.
Yes. I mean, and everything that we're sharing, it was fun, and there was a certain funness to all of this game. It just doesn't work, though. There's been too many people that have really registered and then not ever gone to the forum in moments like that. And it just ultimately, wouldn't it be amazing if the leaders were more interested in the results of transformation? And their coach was interacting with them in the individual people and whether they got anything close to what they had written down. I mean, they say at Landmark, I believe it's in your syllabus, the context is decisive. If someone was leading without any pressure for numbers, imagine the transformations that could happen. And I bet the optional evenings would be amazing because it would just take away all of that. And
Well, and
whatever
I'll push this
go ahead.
further. I'll even push this further, outside of just the optional evenings. I mean, Landmark's entire business structure is really around its leaders bringing guests and registering people. And, it's all the way, inviting people to that Tuesday evening session that you're talking about, but all the way into training them to be a program leader for Landmark. I mean, at each different level, it's like, okay, now you have to register, it used to be 15 people. I don't know how many it is. And so many of them have to be people in your personal life. And so many of them have to be people that you don't know. And then you candidate, you make yourself through that program, and then you get into another program, and it's now you have to lead to 100 people. And so many of those 100 people need to register. And so the entire structure all the way to the top is having.
But here's the thing, those registrations, I worked in the centers. The number one by far, the greatest amount of people are just people whose friends called in and they told them to call in or go online and register.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something in the year 2024 called inbound marketing and sales, inbound marketing. HubSpot is the premier place for this. Landmark has all the leads and all the sales it needs. If it had an actual sales department, they don't need to do all this. They'll be more successful. And I know people have been saying that to them, but it's really painstaking. Here's the other way that this works is it's also duplicitous on Landmark's part. When you do the forum, then you go to the advanced course. In the advanced course, people now go into, I had a guy who recently told me that he was severely upset with his experience in the leaders training program, which is what the new introduction leaders program is. He said it was basically exactly the same as the introduction leaders program, although everybody promised him it wouldn't be, with a little bit of the SELP dropped in. Now, what does that mean? The SELP is about community projects. So in the new leaders training program, people do something called a passion project. So when they're selling this course at the advanced course, of course, they're emphasizing people's leadership. They're not saying you will sell the forum to 10 people in your life. They don't say that. And that's how you will know you're an unreasonable person who's undauntable, who can change the world forever. You can be bold because you sold 10 people the forum. They don't say that to you. But anyways, in the self-expression and leadership program, 70 in the Landmark's promotional materials, and I always thought, oh, that's so amazing, but I'm suspicious of this. They say that out of Landmark's program, 70,000 non-for-profit organizations and pro bono projects have happened. Except I led the self-expression leadership program, and nobody measures, counts. They don't even track. Maybe some people did on their own accord, but
right, for themselves.
The community project. So you're in the advanced course, they're telling you can do a community project and change your community. But what those leaders are being held to, and you again can get thrown out of being a leader, what they're held to is the number of people registering in the forum and people signing up for the next program. So again, imagine what would have been like the world could have been like the last 30 years if they brought that kind of intentionality behind registering people into the forum to making sure every person succeeded in their project. They may not have succeeded, but you could only imagine if that whole 70,000 people had somebody behind them coaching them to win and develop their own vision and turn it over and have it exist in a community. How amazing that would be. But they don't know. We could have a list of 70,000 if that's what they're referring to. There's no list of those 70,000 projects. Nobody cared when I did it if I did it or didn't do it. They even say it's not really about the project, but they sold you that it was. So it's that kind of leaders being salespeople and sales being the way in which they are interacted with and measured is really
Measured, yeah.
inauthentic, and it lacks integrity, and it's unethical. I know at Landmark they took ethics out of integrity, but they might want to put it back in.
Yeah.
Because it does not, nobody would ever expect your trusted leaders to actually have an ulterior agenda behind the scene that they're in survival about.
Well, and most people are completely blind to the fact that, the person who they're looking forward to, the person that's inspiring them, the person that's leading this program is being measured on how many people that person sitting in their chair is going to bring to their next event, or how many people in their life they're going to register. It's not until you start leading programs that you kind of open your eyes to, oh, wait a minute, like, this is the game we're really playing.
But you also just expect you expect your therapist to not be worried about you bringing people to the next session. You expect them to be with you, for you, 100%, with nothing up their sleeve, or even, and I loved bringing people. I loved actually empowering other people to bring people. I don't really have a problem with that. Have your sales department do that. There's so many people that would love to know how to do it effectively.
And there's some great people who, and that's the other thing. It's just because somebody's doing sales doesn't mean there's anything sleazy or bad about it.
Sales is a good thing.
Yeah, there's people who are great about it, but the fact that it was replaced with this whole enrollment and registration thing, and
it's all a big crazy word salad. And I mean, on my cynical side, and I think this is true, and it's another opinion, Landmark, is that, well, you have the people leading the courses, so they're getting sales for you because their attention's on that, and they've done that for free or at very low cost, these leaders. Then you also have, and then the staff, they are called salespeople. They need to be called salespeople. I guess part B of this number 2 is have a sales department, especially because they're online now. They could literally just have a sales division and people sold.
Well, it's just the way you do things in 2024. That's just the way you do business.
It's the way you do business. And then they could get a commission, and nobody would have a problem with that. When I go looking at furniture, I have no issue that I know that the lady who's very professional and really great and gave me her card and was awesome with me. And I didn't buy that day, but I bought 2 weeks later, and I liked her. So I made sure she was the one I bought from.
You went back to the same person.
She got a commission. It was not that big of a deal. So
Correct.
This whole thing is, I think, but my point is they don't have to pay commissions then. They don't have to, they both get the free labor on that end, and they don't have to pay commissions on that end because they don't call it sales. No, it's this whole enrollment thing. It's this whole other thing. And it's just all a massive needs to end, go. It's time to professionalize yourself. Landmark is another way of saying it. Okay. That's number 2. We've gone through 2. We might not get through them all tonight. Let's see.
We can power through here. I think we can do number 3 and 4 pretty quickly.
That's right. The informed consent. So this is super important. This is, again, really about the staff and leaders and even the general public. So I heard that that it was said in one of the seminar leader weekends that what I said in my interview with Aaron, there were a lot of inaccuracies. Okay. Landmark calls things inaccurate, not true, misconception.
It's what they hang on to for them. It's like, no, this was not accurate, or we said something that wasn't in their eyes wasn't 100% true. We didn't say it the way they would have said it.
Yeah, well, but yes. And so when you do go into leadership, everybody, one of the things that you have to do to get candidated again, and it's when I did, first of all, this might not be the case now, but the way it was for a long time and the way it was for me is I had to memorize a very thick document called the Corporate Questions and Answers.
It was about 50 questions at the time. I don't know how many it is now, if they even have that.
Well, they've changed over the years. When I did it, there was a question, is Werner Erhard part of your company or something like that? But the answer was no. Werner Erhard sold the company to the employees. We wish him well. There was a media attack on him. And, he won the Mahatma Gandhi Award. Okay. Mm-hmm. When I was 20 and I was in the Introduction Leaders program, I was like, okay, like I got passed on that. I didn't even know who Werner Erhard was. I had no understanding of any of this, like the background, any of it. I literally, and I believe I just had someone call me today and say, well, you're an insider at Landmark. And I just kind of thought, oh, well, this is how everybody feels. But there is all this information about the organization. So I read a book called Outrageous Betrayal, which I had never heard of. But I've also read another book called 60 Minutes and the Assassination of Werner Erhard. That book, I believe, was highly promoted, and it would be like in center manager's office. So I believe that was a very pro their side of the story. However, in both books and in Werner Erhard's biography, that he commissioned, I believe, or he was involved in his own biography that was written about him, they bring up Scientology in each book at least 150 times.
Correct.
So then I watched this movie the other night called Semi-Tough from the 70s, and it's a complete rip on the S training. And even there, they make a joke about, oh, you didn't get it? Well, go do Scientology. That's a joke in the movie. So this Landmark was competitive with Scientology. At the time, or however you want to put it, and why?
Well, even now today, from your interview, I mean, there's so many different things where you talk to somebody who's participated in Scientology, and then you tell them how we do things, and they literally will say, "Oh, well, we do that in Scientology too. We just call it such and such." Like you said something about 5-week planning, and they call it battle planning, and it's literally the exact same thing. They just have different names for it.
Yeah, and I have another issue with the Speaking Being book, which was really interesting to read. I don't know if you read it. But it's basically a transcript of the forum in 1989 that Werner Erhard led. So it's literally like a forum. A lot of the forum is in there. I don't know if the whole forum is in there, but it's probably edited. But then they're doing like philosophical examinations about how Heidegger's work matches up with the principles of the forum. And it looks all really great. You're like, wow, this is fascinating. But they don't give you, like, I hawked this book and read this thing, and Heidegger was a Nazi. Now, maybe if I would have known he's a Nazi and figured out that everybody was a Nazi who was a philosopher in 1956 or whatever, I would have made a choice, but there's no informed consent. I just end up being like an idiot saying, oh, look, yeah, Heidegger, blah, 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 blah. And people are like, you don't know that this guy is completely controversial, Heidegger? So what I believe Landmark should do is they should make a video on their website, and it should be something like, let me tell you about our past and where we come from. And they could do a balanced view of it. It doesn't have to hide anything. It doesn't have to, but like they could train people in where this work all came from. I'm making a list right now of all the words I hear in the Scientology universe channel. I don't think Landmark Scientology, but I do believe that we use, at least in the centers, we used all sorts of terms that they use as well. Like the list is now up to 150 different words that I used on a daily basis that they use all the time in Scientology.
In the centers division.
Correct. So there's something about all of that is just, why not just say, yeah, we all came from the same era in the 60s, and educate people so they don't end up, when people are telling them, is this Scientology? You're like, oh, no, they have nothing to do with each other. That's what the corporate Q&A says, but that's not the whole story. And so to find out after decades that it is different, and you trusted the people writing that corporate question and answer because it's Landmark and it has integrity and it's the truth and it's not spinned. You would never expect Landmark to spin stuff. And yet that's exactly what I was trained to do. I was trained to represent Landmark, as was every person in the Introduction Leaders Program. And I was trained to do it through spin, and information was withheld from me. And going back to that, and this is part of the whole deal, going back to, sorry, I'm going the wrong direction. We're letting number 4 out of the bag. Going back to the influence continuum, down here for organizations, constructive and healthy organizations have informed consent. People know the facts before they're in. people go in and they know that being a seminar leader means being on 5 conference calls when you're supposed to be on your family vacation before you give your word to being a seminar leader. Move over here to the right. And on this continuum, destructive or unhealthy organization. So informed consent, the other side is deceptive and manipulative. And it is deceptive and manipulative to withhold all this information. Sorry, I'm a bit on what do you call it? A soapbox at the moment. But that makes me mad. Werner Erhardt's, we now have court documents. I'll show this in an upcoming episode. Court documents, but I've been picking apart and researching how much Werner Erhardt got paid out of all this deal. And, you know, why couldn't you just said, on my corporate Q&A in the Werner Erhardt licensed his work to us and he's getting paid X millions of dollars. Why couldn't you just say that? Letting me believe that nobody...
millions of dollars, consulting fees and, you know, licensing, and he's licensing it to all these other companies and all that stuff. And it's just this whole, he's just this noble man who sold it for $1 to the employees and all this stuff. But that's not the whole story.
It's not the whole story. So the third thing is informed consent. So for Landmark, that would mean like cleaning up, because we're all trained in integrity, your inauthenticity, and where you didn't do it the way it was meant to be done, which is what we're referring to here and what other people would expect you to do. Cleaning it up is one of the ways that you can fix this, because you won't lose your company over it if you just restore your integrity. And you can't just create a new era on top of this BS that's inauthentic. It will never work. Integrity is like gravity, and that's like taking putting icing on a mud pie. It don't bake a cake, Landmark. You can't do that. Okay. Yeah. It's just icing hiding mud, as you have trained me. I've read that 1,000 times. Oh my gosh. Okay, good. So here's the next one. All right. That was quicker. You were right. But not that quick. Whoops. Keep moving through my thing. Okay, number 4. Sorry. Staff. This is easy. 40 hours a week. Good salary. The executive shouldn't work more than 50 hours a week. You should just put a stake in the ground. We can do this. This is this. That's that. And you can do this because you know how we know you can do this? Because every time people bring up staff hours, you act like the whole company will fall apart. Except here's what we know about this. Are you ready? Every other company, pretty much except for maybe stockbrokers, I don't know. Every other company does this, especially with their basic staff.
Correct.
In the whole, like, United States, I know this is a very American video because we're Americans. And if you're from other countries, I think they even do less than 40 hours.
They do less. Correct.
It is, you are big, competent people, Landmark. You can just get off of it and do this. Even in Scientology, this is something Landmark really needs to, this is bad. I'm sorry to say it, but in Scientology, in their centers, even they have a day shift and an evening shift. Now, that would mean people would get to have families. Maybe they wouldn't have to yield to the word of staff member and the sacred vow of doing whatever's wanted and needed.
No, it's just so ridiculous, because even when you're not working, right, and you're on vacation with your family or your friends or whatever, you're getting calls. Well, first of all, you have to replace yourself with someone who's not getting paid.
Well, they don't do that anymore because they canceled assisting.
Oh, correct. Okay.
So they used to do that. They used to do that. So you'd have to get volunteers to come in. And we're using the word volunteer because that is what that is. But it's somebody in the assisting program to do your job for you while you're on vacation. And often, because that's the nature of volunteering, if you go to like a non-for-profit, they run into this, people might not show up. And then you spend 3 days when you get back being handled for all the stuff that didn't work while you're gone. While you're on vacation, you're dreading being on vacation and Could you just let these people live a normal life? Seriously, they can have families. People can have a family and be on staff. Do you know how
people have time to go exercise after work or before work? I mean,
oh my gosh, exercise. You cannot have your whole life work. It's impossible. I've tried for years. And I had a really workable life with my health, with my finances, but then dating would get in because you only get an hour a day for you. That's like it. There's just no way. So then the people who decide to have kids, they might get 2 hours out of the day, but then they don't work out. And then the people who work out, they don't get to have blah, blah, blah. It's insane. Here's the thing I'd like Landmark to understand. Do you know how many people would work for you if you would just act normal?
If you paid them well and if they worked just a normal
You could just pay
40
them
hours.
normal. Just pay them normal. Just doesn't have to be below. Do you know how many people you'd have work for you? Do you know how successful your company would be? It's insane. So that's why you're accused of being culty and weird and in a high control group and exploitive because this system makes no sense. And you have all these people with reports of being sick. One of the most fascinating things that I read or that I saw was that they're now understanding neuroscience. They're now understanding about how the body responds to stress and being held in a state of stress for long periods of time. And I'm going to butcher this, so this is just a theory, but I doubt many people have worked in a job where they have the percentage of people that I know that had to leave their job because they had an autoimmune disease. Things like adrenal fatigue, Epstein-Barr, like all of these that are part of, and then they turn it into like, well, you're in the game, and the game is, like this is for stellar people, but there's no support for you when you leave either. Yeah. People have been telling me, oh, I should have said this at the beginning. This really irks me. I have had so many messages from people, especially staff members. I would probably say at least 500 now. None of them know each other. None of them talk to each other. Maybe
they didn't work in the same,
but they're not related.
They didn't work in the same center. Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't work in the same center. I've worked in a bunch of centers, and I know a lot of people, and they all say the same thing. I had to heal after I was on staff. So what does that tell you? That your people who dedicated their life to you, whether they completed with honor or they quit, they all use that word, heal. It makes me cry that this organization I worked at, I had no idea people would leave being on staff, even with flying colors and everybody loving them. And what they went through for themselves afterwards was a process of healing.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's unnecessary. Your company will function fine.
And it's for years, I've heard same, I've had people who will reach out who say they've been on this healing journey for years.
Yes.
Yeah. Because they'll just cut you, even if you left on good terms or not.
It's a whole crazy mess. So why do people need to heal? And why do they have to complete that with you? Why aren't you completing that? I was always trained, it's not about what you say, it's about how people are left. So all of these complaints are what you're leaving people with, Landmark. That's my communication. Yeah. I'm not even that. I'm kind of getting ready to move on with my life, and I'm through, I think, some of the worst pain of all this for myself. I just think that this is just absolutely unacceptable. I was trained that there are things that used to be acceptable that are now unacceptable, and there are things that used to be unacceptable that are now acceptable. Like they used to be acceptable to litter, but now everybody's afraid to use, not put something in the recycling bin, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe this stuff was acceptable somehow in the past, but this is unacceptable.
Maybe it wasn't thing. maybe Brian, it wasn't ever acceptable. We were just led to believe that it was acceptable.
Well, somehow the graduate body would or people would, however, I just think it'd be great if Landmark, like the actual real people, found this unacceptable. Like they got their own integrity in with that. It's not, as they would say, our work.
Yeah, if Joan and Harry and all the executives would come out and say, hey, look, guys, you know what? We really screwed up here. We got to restore our integrity. And here's what we're going to do about it. And we're going to take you seriously and all this stuff. And here's how we're, shifting. But even at every single time, that I've seen Landmark, quote, redesign the enterprise, and that's their thing, right? They're constantly redesigning how they're doing things. It's a lot of the same stuff. It's just a different logo, it's a different vision, or maybe a little different vision, but it's the same stuff essentially.
It's a new context slapped on the same unworkable, unhealthy, high control, high demand system. Until you address the system, systems are part of integrity. So integrity, it's like your bicycle. You know, if the structure of your bicycle was not in integrity, your bicycle will quit working. So it's one thing to work on the spokes and the wheels. It's another thing if the actual frame itself doesn't work. And Landmark has a framing issue. And that's what leads to you being, like you shared last week, physically abused. People making me be on hours of phone calls till I surrender the fact that I'm not a gay person. I'm nothing. And who I really am is this much bigger thing called a seminar leader and all that crap. And here's the point. Maybe that's all true, but nobody needed to go there with me about my being gay. That conversation did not need to happen. So why just take it out? It is not productive. It's unhealthy. You've created that. It's created a cultural environment. People can be respectful, have integrity, work hard, lead good programs. They don't need all of this wraparound. It's never really worked out for Landmark, is the truth, because they have a powerful course that if they would just quit acting like weirdos, could probably take off and go viral in the whole world. They could be bigger than Tony Robbins. I mean, really? Everybody I know who does Tony Robbins, who did Landmark at least, because I only know Landmark people, but they always say it was really great, but it wasn't as good as the forum. So, you know, I mean, for whatever it's worth, there is a lot to be said about that. So that's number 4. And then the final one, everyone, is hire trauma-informed therapists. This is on the list, okay? So this is a big one. Why is this a big one? Well, one of the things that what has Landmark be called culty and it gets criticized is when an organization acts like they have all the answers. And look, people are going to share and discover and open up about situations in their lives like sexual assaults. And even when they do the forum, it may not even occur to them that they were sexually assaulted on Friday morning. But as the weekend progresses, it might start occur to them like, this thing happened to me and this person touched me. And you know, like because people, when the way the brain works, it can disassociate from things. So people who've had trauma, and they might not even be necessarily unhappy during the forum. They might not be like emotionally upset about anything. But I think it would be really smart if Landmark had some therapists that were outside people that could train the leaders so that maybe they could say to somebody, you know what, some of you really saw some things that were traumatic, and I've learned about trauma and I'm not an expert about it, but you may want to see a trauma-informed therapist or something, you know, out of some of the really painful things that you've done. Like, why not just get along with the rest of the self-help world? Like, and therapists, why do you always have to be separate from them? Like, that would be such a loving act to do, so people would know that there are resources available to them, because you have many people who are upset with you that your advice was take the Excellence in the Zone seminar. So you just realized and saw like, wow, this horrible thing happened. You let go of the story, you're free. But maybe some of those people don't need to do the Excellence in the Zone seminar. Maybe what they need to do is go heal up those things that were traumatic for them. And this is how the world speaks, because as life has progressed in the last 50 years since the first S training, so has the world of psychology and therapy. So maybe if Landmark actually got on board with that and supported that, didn't always have to prove that it's better than that, or whatever that unique trying purple cow branding thing you're trying to do, marketing thing, maybe you could get that would have you look really good and compassionate. People should say, hey, I feel like someone gaslit me, and not be told gaslighting is a story. But maybe listen and like hear the person out before they immediately go on a dissertation about how there's no such thing as gaslighting. It's not just really ineffective and makes people leave your courses and not want to share and have other people do them, but it's tone deaf, and it makes you look really out of date. Yeah. And it makes people embarrassed to want to send people. And I think a lot of people, there's trauma. People are sharing about all these traumas, and maybe you will stop acting in ways that could leave people traumatized if you actually knew what trauma was all about. I don't even know. I just know I don't know. And I think it'd be huge of Landmark, and you would actually could rebrand yourself as a healthy organization and be in the listening of the rest of the planet, basically, the seeking planet, the rest of the people who are actually out to embetter their life and change the world. I was listening to a book the other day because I've been considering starting coaching people, not in Landmark stuff, but I'm a coach. I'm trained to be a coach. I can be a coach, etc. And one of the things that they said is that, you know, there was literally in their steps was make sure you get training in trauma and you understand it, so you can tell people where to go if they bring trauma up to you as a coach. This was in a book called Coach Builder, which was really more about building a website. So this is common knowledge. Anyways, go ahead, Eric.
Well, yeah, it's and that, you know, it's that I've had people. This used to happen in the centers all the time, where people would say, oh, you don't need to go why do 10 years of therapy? Would just do 3 days in an evening. You know, but for some people that may be the path that's the best path for them, instead of having them registered, take 3 days in an evening.
Yes. Okay. So now, I'm laughing because one of the comments was a while ago, but she's like, okay, now it's time for number 5. So clearly I got a little long-winded, but I appreciate everybody. Before we end, does anybody in the chat have a question or a comment that you would like us to, if you put in a question or comment that you'd like us to address before we go? You can just chat and put it in there. Go ahead.
Yeah. Any questions about anything? It could be about the centers, about, you know, I mean, these are just kind of 5 things that Brian and I came up with, and I'm sure some other people might have other things that they would want to add. And it'll be good to see what the comments are and what people have to share. I think one of the things that I was telling Brian that I think could be powerful is to hear from people. You know, what questions do you have? What do you want to know? What can we share about? Oh, one thing we forgot to talk about, Brian, is the sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Oh yeah, I never heard that expression.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great way to end today's show. Really, is the sunlight is the best disinfectant, because, you know, Brian ended up looking this up. Somebody posted it in one of the comments. They said, no, was it sunlight's the best disinfectant, right?
Yeah, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So I had never heard this expression. I'm on a different computer, but I had to go to Chat GPT and to look up what the heck are they talking about. And I'm going to do it right now while we're all here.
Yeah,
what
just
is
a quick...
the expression sunlight is the best disinfectant? Disinfectant mean. And ChatGPT tells us the expression sunlight is the best disinfectant is often attributed to U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis. It means that transparency and openness are the most effective ways to eliminate corruption or wrongdoing. Just as sunlight kills bacteria and other harmful microorganisms, exposing actions to publicly scrutiny. Oh, exposing them to public scrutiny helps to prevent unethical behavior or misconduct. Essentially, it suggests that shining a light on things brings them into a clear view, making it harder for bad actors to hide their actions. So that's
So
why
it's
we're
so
doing. Yeah, go
good.
ahead. Yeah.
It's so good because, Brian and I have been in the inquiry. It's like, why are we doing this? Like what are we, what are we doing this for? And we're two people that were heavily involved for many years, and we were super fans, and we were senior staff members, and we worked in multiple centers, and um, we led programs. And for as long as I can remember, there is no talking about Landmark publicly. I mean, it is like a big does not happen. There's no note taking in the forum. There's no videos. There's no photos. There's no, it's all made in this whole thing, how they want you to be present. And it's the same thing. Like, there's no videos allowed in the centers. There's no photos. But we're bringing light to this because we think this is important. This is an organization that was a part of our life for a long time. And there's different people on different spectrums, right? But for us, we thought, well, it's time to bring this to the light. It's time to speak publicly about this. There's people who have watched our video, the first one, now probably our second one, who are literally telling us, thank you so much for doing this, because we knew that this needed to come out, this needed to happen. So I think we can end on that point.
Yeah. And for everybody, I know this is complex. I know that a lot of people's hearts, I really feel for everybody, but look, I think our organization is different than some of these others, and I have a opinion that that Landmark is capable of getting this cleaned up, and
this could get cleaned up so fast.
It could. I think they could. The whole thing could be altered in like 6 weeks. Okay, good. So somebody said, how much discretion was given to center managers? The staff at the center I went to were incapable of hearing the word no. Committed grotesque boundary violations. Yes, Steinlight. Nowadays, there is not as nowadays there isn't physical centers per se that much. Since the pandemic, mostly people work remotely from home. So a lot of those kind of dynamics that could happen in a center, especially centers would have sometimes a really good, healthy community going with a great leader in front, the center manager, and then sometimes not. I think a lot of that drama is the remote working actually has fixed. So that's my answer to that. And I think that's a good thing for Landmark. All right, good. Any other questions before we go? No? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And let's, keep on keeping on. Here's to living a life you love. All right. Bye.
Thanks, Brian.